Okay, will you say and spell your name, just so that the right name is attached to the right file?
Nora Burn, Noraburn.
Great. As a start, can you just give me just the thumbnail sketch, the kind of short biographical sketch of who you are, where you came from, where you grew up, where you live now, what you're doing?
Okay, I grew up in Delaware and went to the University of Delaware. Then I studied art history, and then I came up to Boston College, got a master's in American Studies. While I was working on my master's thesis, I did temp work, which landed me in a high-tech company, a software company. And so I ended up working in high-tech for most of my life, most of my adult life. And I did eventually finish my master's. And at some point, I detoured into law school. I got my law degree and became an attorney, but didn't practice. And I continued to work in high tech. And so I'm still in Boston, and mainly think of myself as having a career in high tech.
Okay. I've been talking to people all over the country about this current moment in American history, and everyone seems to have very strong feelings about it, although there's not a real consensus about what the phrase "this current moment" even means. Can you tell me what it means to you, or what you think is implied by that term in 2009?
Clearly big things are going on in the country that affect everyone. The biggest things that have been happening to me in the last year and a half, feel particular to me. So, I got laid off while I was recovering from shoulder surgery, and so I'm right now on disability. And so there's lots of unemployment out there, but I don't sort of think of my being unemployed right now as because of the economic crisis that happened. And clearly it fed into it, because if the economy weren't in such bad shape, if high tech were as hungry for employees as they were 10 years ago, then I would be working, because I would have felt sucked back into it. I would have gotten sucked back into it, even though what I need to do is to not be working, because my body is in pain when I'm on a computer for so much time. So for me, it was what happened in the country turned out to be lucky for me, in that I got laid off. I could finally let my body try to heal from this thing I'd been going through for 6 or 7 years. I was just in almost constant pain, and doing my job was worsening it. And because my company was on hard times, when I had the shoulder surgery, when I was out on disability recovering from that, I got laid off. And then, so for the first time, I was getting to take time off and let my body recover, whereas before I was just on this treadmill. So I've been able to step off the treadmill and explore different ways of trying to recover and get rest and enjoy life. And before I understood that I was going to be on disability this whole time, I didn't know that this insurance company would be paying for me to take time off because of stuff that's not, the sort of details of how that all came about are worth going into. But before I understood that, I was looking for work here and there, and I wasn't getting jobs, because there are a million people out there trying to get these same jobs. So I was willing to take some low-paying job that would put me in pain constantly, and I didn't get those jobs because the economy is in such a mess. And I feel really grateful that it happened that way. And the other thing is I knew not to make myself crazy looking, because so many people are not succeeding in getting jobs. So I just thought I should let myself rest and recover. Of all the times in the world to just go ahead and realize you're going to be without a job, this is one of them. It's just I'm not going to get a job. So this is a gift being handed to me that I get to recover. And I didn't have that before. So I've actually, there's stresses of it, like not knowing when this insurance company is going to say, forget it, we're not going to pay you.
You don't have a way of knowing that?
No. I mean, because they make you, everything they do is to make you feel uneasy and certain and to make you prefer being employed than...
What are the ways that they do that?
The way they ask you questions, and they don't give you really concrete information. I knew, because I had tried to go back to my employer on a part-time basis after my shoulder surgery, because I knew layoffs were coming, so I was really anxious to get back there. Even before the doctor recommended I go back, I went back to work to try to not lose my job. And so I knew then, from that experience, that I was able to work part-time. Under the rules of the disability, I was able to work part-time to supplement what they were paying me. But then once I lost my job, this is hard to explain, the way they were asking me questions, it was almost, it was like I wasn't allowed to work. And even as recently as 3 weeks ago, I have a new person handling my claim, and she's treating me they just make you unsure of what you're allowed to do. Are you allowed to work? Are you allowed to be looking for work? Because she's like, if you're looking for work and you're just not finding it, we're not going to be paying you. And it's like, well, wait a minute. My understanding was I actually could look for work and look for part-time work and do part-time work to supplement this, or I could look for full-time work that uses my body differently. I don't have to, if I do, I can make a career change and do something. I could do telemarketing, for example, or something like that. I could do retail sales because I'm not using a computer all the time. So that's what's painful, is holding the same position all the time or looking at a monitor screen. I'm allowed to do some lower paying work, and they'll still make up the difference. They'll pay the difference to make me whole, or almost whole from...
So you would think that they would encourage that.
They would encourage that, but they're also playing mind games with you to try to, I think a lot of people who won't parse out what is being said to them or keep track of it will just get freaked out and say, my boyfriend, for example, is just I couldn't deal with this uncertainty that you're dealing with. I'd rather just go get a job and be in pain all the time. And it's I think people will do that. They'll just be so freaked out and intimidated by the insurance company and how they're talking to you and what it is that's going to happen to you and what they can do to you, and that it's just so unpleasant to deal with them that they will instead just go work in pain all the time.
So how much contact do you have with your insurance company?
It varies, but they can call at any time.
It's almost like having a caseworker.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
And the dynamic, the feel of it is that they are checking up on you?
Oh, absolutely. And they're trying to catch you and stuff. So, I started doing this bit of, part-time work, which I was completely permitted to do. And so when I told them that, they said, I couldn't remember the exact date that I started. I couldn't remember if it was July or June. I said I thought it was July. And they said, well, or was it in June? This woman says to me, did you do it in June? And I said, I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. I just didn't have it right in front of me. So maybe a month later, I was talking to a different person at the company who was looking at my thing. And they said, and by that time, I had, looked at my calendar or my pay stub or whatever and confirmed, yeah, it was July, whenever I started this. And so a month later, I'm talking to someone, and she asked me the question, and I said, yeah, it was in July. And she goes, no, it says here you started in June. It's always they're accusing you of something, and you're so you've got to be really clear on your facts, and not be intimidated by people, and not if you're someone who gets spooked and thinks, oh, if someone's treating me like I'm doing something wrong, then I am doing something wrong, and you freak out, it would be an extremely unpleasant life. And then what they'll do is they'll switch the forms that they send to your doctor. So my problem is with fine manipulation, holding the same position and fine manipulation with my arm. And so on, sort of the third visit I had with this doctor who's filling out these forms, they sent a different form. So my employer filled out a form before I went out for my surgery. very detailed. How many hours a day does she do this? How many hours a day is she, sitting, typing, whatever. Very extensive form. But when the most recent visit I had with my doctor, they sent a different form that was like, how many hours a day is she crouching or crawling, and the three options were, the previous form they sent the doctor was, how many hours a day can she do this, or this? And the doctor was saying 4 hours a day I could do whatever it was. But then the next form they sent was, is she able to return to work with no restrictions? Is she able to return to work with restrictions? I forget what the first one I said, but it was like 3 gross categories.
Or unable to, right.
Right, unable to work at all. And it was a different question than they had asked him before. They said, so I can work. I mean, in fact, I'm working, doing some part-time stuff. I do volunteer work. There are things I can do, but I can't work 8 hours a day at what I was doing before.
Right.
But the way they asked the question the second time, so when she got me on the phone, she says, your doctor says you can work. I'm like, well, yes. In fact, my doctor and I were sitting there laughing at this questionnaire, like, can you crawl? Can you crouch? Because it's like, and she was saying, I don't understand why you can't work. Your job is sedentary. It's not like, I'm like, right, exactly. My job is sedentary. I can't sit. I can't sit for much time at all, and I can't hold the same position. It's like, it would be better if I had a doctor of occupational medicine tell me it would be better if I'd been a dancer. Like, my body type is better because it's highly flexible, and so moving all the time is the right thing for my body, and me trying to hold my position is the wrong thing. Anyway, so they just mess with you like that. They'll and why not send the form that is the form my boss filled out? So in February, my boss filled out a form saying, these are the number of hours required to sit. These are the number of hours. She's doing keyboarding. When you're determining whether you're going to extend my benefits, don't send a form that talks about crawling and lifting a large amount of weight, because I don't have to crawl or crouch or lift a lot of weight. I have to sit at a freaking keyboard or sit in meetings. Anyway, so they just mess with you.
Yeah. So, from your point, I want to get back to the economic stuff and the layoffs and kind of your sense of that sector of the economy here in Boston over the last, decade and more that you've been involved in it. But let me just detour a little further into the healthcare stuff, because the time that you've been dealing with your insurance company has also been this extraordinary moment in U.S. politics when the healthcare system is at the very center of virtually everything, including a lot of madness. But what's been your sense of the whole healthcare reform debate, and what has it been like for you to be in the position that you're in and watch this unfolding?
It's interesting because my main reaction is it has given me hope that this will all change. So and the thing I'm dealing with isn't so much healthcare, because I'm buying under COBRA, which was subsidized. So the government, because of how bad things are, subsidized people's COBRA, which helped enormously. And my subsidized period has ended now. But so health insurance at the moment is not my issue. The insurance company I'm dealing with is a disability insurance company. So those issues are separate. But I do know my COBRA period is going to come to an end. And my unemployed boyfriend is on COBRA, and his COBRA period is going to come to an end. And I am fairly good at calming myself down, so it's part of that. But I just keep thinking, well, you know what? They could take care of all of this, and it could become true in a not very long amount of time. It could become true that you don't have to be employed or under COBRA to have medical insurance. And so for me, I'm just hot dog. And another friend I was talking to who's going to be unemployed imminently, he has pre-existing conditions. He's had some problems he hasn't been able to get treatment for years because it was a pre-existing condition, and he had a period where he had no insurance. Even though he works in the same high-paying, highly coddled industry, like our employers take good care of us. He, for some reason, for some period, had no health insurance and he can't get treated. And he was saying, you know what? Pretty soon I can get insurance and get treated. So it's been sort of the debate and the antics have been nasty and ugly. But, here on December 29th or whatever this is, 28th, I'm feeling confident that there's going to be some bill passed that's going to maybe make it not disastrous for me. If my COBRA runs out, I might not be screwed. It may not be catastrophic for me.
Have you been tracking on the evolution of this bill as it's been batted around over the last 4 or 5 months?
Not in any detail because, frankly, the news I get is mainly through the networks, just the 3 networks. And I think there's so much bad reporting and nonsense. So they cover the nonsense, and you don't get the detail. And so I just realized I'm not going to get right information, and I ignore it. And I know there are people like my friend Connie who will actually go to other sources and learn about it, but I don't.
Okay, let's go back to the economy. Tell me a little bit more about the work that you've been doing in Boston over the last, I lost track of the number of years that we're talking about, but after law school, I guess.
Yeah.
What has that sector of the economy looked like in Boston? You said 10 years ago, if you were in the position that you're in now, 10 years ago, you probably would be working because there was such a hunger for workers of your sort. Can you just talk about kind of the trajectory of the economic changes here in Boston in that part of the economy that you've seen at pretty close hand?
Yeah, I don't know if it's specific to Boston. I would say my industry, I identify as being part of something that happens a lot in Boston and a lot in California. In fact, I've worked for California companies more than once. So I don't know if what I have to say is particular to Boston, but my industry, when I first got into it, they took someone who was an art history major and getting a master's in American studies. I had I had 1 course or 2 courses in computer programming, but I didn't have a computer science degree or whatever, or any science degree. So it just sort of sucked in just someone who had good analytical abilities and was willing to work. And then it got even more broad than that, in the .com days, in the late 90s. There were so many companies that came into existence and everyone needed employees, and they were taking everyone. You could be a social worker with absolutely, just if you could get yourself in there and be reasonable, you had a job. And even plenty of people who couldn't be reasonable had jobs. It was crazy how they were just sucking in people from anywhere to employ, to fill the ranks of these companies. And then starting 2001, maybe slightly before that, but it didn't enter my consciousness that this was all tanking until 2002. So after 9/11, I heard of people talking about how this is hurting, we're hurting now economically, but it still didn't affect me. I was still oh, everything's still fine, everything's... and then in March of 2002, my company went under. The company, it was a security software company. And we were all on September 12th, we were all we're security. We're totally going to want to buy our stuff. But our application was too particular, and people don't spend money on security in the right ways. It's a whole different issue. But anyway, our company went under, and then for the first time ever in my life, I was unemployed from March of 2002 to sometime in the summer. I couldn't get a job. And actually, that's not true. I got a contract job very quickly at a company that I didn't want to be at because it was just very poorly run, and it was a debacle. But I used to just be able to pick from among 3 jobs. If anytime I looked for a job, I would get 2 or 3 offers. And now I was having to take this job at this company, this contract job I knew I didn't want. Then in August of that year, I ended up taking a job in a company out in Waltham. So it meant that I had to drive to work for the first time. Like, I'd always been able to commute on public transportation and had refused jobs that I had to drive to. I was forced to take this job that I had to drive to, and couldn't leave it. So for 2.5 years, I was driving to a job that I hated, and it wasn't security software, it was accounting software. It was not something I felt passionately about. I didn't feel particularly passionate about the company. I didn't think the company was, like, I didn't sort of admire the company and want to work there. I just had to work there. And it's not really gotten better since. I mean, ever since I left, so I let myself leave there in 2005. And pretty much every job I've taken since then has just been a job. I took the job because I could get that job. Mm-hmm. Like, I no longer get to say, with one exception, I took a very low-paying contract job at an educational software company that I admired. Like, I thought this company was great, and I thought the founder was a great human being, and I wanted to be there. And they paid me, like, I want to say like $25 an hour. Like, I had been making like $50 and $60 an hour, and I was happy to get the 25, and I was happy to be working there. And I did end up having to leave there because that didn't cover my expenses, and I then took a job for $50 an hour at the company, the dumbass company, laid me off earlier this year.
So, but in your corner of the economy, then, it sounds like the things that the country is experiencing as being a kind of huge structural shift of the last year or year and a half actually hit your sector of the economy right after 9/11.
My industry had already started changing because of outsourcing, and just also because of people identifying computers. By the time you're into the late 90s, a generation of kids know that you major in computer science if you want to make the bucks. And the dot-com bubble sucked in a lot of people who just wanted to make a lot of money. And because of the internet itself, outsourcing to other countries was possible. So I remember in 1999 working for a company, and we outsourced to the Ukraine and Romania, I think. There were two places. One was definitely the Ukraine. And India got involved in our industry more. So from, I don't know, maybe the early 90s, they got it that this was a sector to get into. And a lot of very smart people got the education they needed to work the jobs that we were all just, sitting around. I mean, our life was really easy. Like in the 80s and the early 90s, being in that industry, you had a very easy life. You were being paid big money for not a huge number of hours. Like, you might have been in that building for a lot of hours, but we were having fun. Anyway, so a large set of people who were willing to work harder for less came in, and our life changed a lot. And more than 9/11, I think it was the dot-com bust that changed our industry. So lots of people had gotten sucked into the industry, and then we had to shed a lot of people, and the whole nature of the whole nature of the industry changed. And then for me, as I said, it happened in March of 2002. It hit home for me.
Now, even though your current layoff, it only coincidentally kind of lines up with the huge crash in the country at large, can you describe a little bit what life in Boston has looked like over the last year and a half or so that this collapse has really widened? Does the city look different to you? Are there things you notice? Or, is the feel different? Or what are the ways that the economic collapse manifests itself in a kind of dailiness in life in Boston as you see it?
I first wasn't noticing it so much in Boston. Like, I would visit my sister down around the Philadelphia area, and I was like, wow, like, things look desolate here. Like, strip malls where most of the stores were closed. Like, things looked depressed. And I remember that Christmas a year ago, so 2008, I was just like, man, our restaurants are packed, our stores are packed. I'm not seeing any evidence of an economic crisis here in Boston. But right after Christmas, I did start noticing it. And then I started noticing stores and restaurants being closed. And there was some period, maybe like in the spring, I walk around the city a lot, and just like walking from, I don't know, maybe it was like the Boston Common through Back Bay and into the Fenway, I was just like, there are an awful lot of stores closed up, and things you would not have guessed, like a Bertucci's that's been around forever, gone. A Bennigan's, like, you know, and a Bennigan's, it's like, who, you know, wouldn't think, like, kind of a low-end eatery, a very affordable eatery, but, like, a lot of things were closing up. And the thing that I'll remember the most, I think, is talking to all my friends who kept their jobs. So I knew people who got laid off, but when I would spend time with people who still had jobs, they were just stressed out, because surviving a layoff is very stressful, because you know that they're cutting, and like, you've got to pick up the work of the people they laid off. So almost everyone I know who's working will tell stories about how they're doing the job of either 2 or 3 people, and frankly, they're just freaking stressed out. And so here was I in this situation of being, I was happy to not be at that dumbass company anymore. Like, it was unpleasant. I didn't think the thing they were trying to do, I didn't think was technically possible, but they, you know, were holding.
You mean their product?
The product was, I think it was ill-founded. It was not. They were trying to. They had lots of people with their PhDs and other high degrees, like, trying to solve a problem that I think can't be solved. I just didn't think it was a sound thing to build a company on. And people were getting nasty to each other, and it was unpleasant. So I was happy to not be there anymore. And it was stressful at the idea of, like, well, what am I going to do next? And I can't use my body the way, like, you know, because right after the shoulder surgery, I literally couldn't do anything. It wasn't just I couldn't do it without being in pain. It's just like I really didn't have use of my right arm for a while. Anyway, so, like, I was, even with the stress and uncertainty of what I was going to do next, I was still so much happier than the people still working. Like, the people with jobs were, like, just spread so thin and stressed. So they were doing 3 jobs under the threat of losing their job if they didn't do it. And it's, like I said, I went back after my surgery before I was supposed to, because you don't want to lose your job. Like, you're highly motivated to not lose your job, because the idea of not having a job is extremely frightening. It's like, but I gotta say, once it happens, it's not as bad.
Was the experience this time different in any way than the experience in 2002?
In 2002, it was scarier for me because it was the first time it ever happened to me. It's like I had never been without a job before. I'd never been involuntarily without a job before. And I hadn't set myself up to have a cushion at all. But by the time it happened this time, I'd opened up a home equity line of credit, so I would have so I still didn't have a savings account, but I had something that I could turn to pay my bills. And I knew I could survive being unemployed. I knew, it gets better. You will get a job again. So, and then of course when I found out, it was also March of 2009 that I lost this job. And it wasn't until July that I knew I would have disability coverage. But also this time I had a severance package. They gave me 2 months of severance pay, and in 2002 my company just ceased to exist. There was no money, there was no severance package. 2002 was worse for me, personally. But I can imagine for other people, what's going on now is worse, just because this is the worst job market. I mean, as bad as it was in 2002, this is worse.
Right. And it sounds like you know a lot of people who are out there now.
a lot of people who have gotten laid off, but most of them have landed jobs. And that's the other thing, like, and I think it's different in either Boston or my industry, is that, like, I have recruiters calling me. I had a friend write to me and say, do you know anyone who could fill this job? We're having a hard time filling it. So the couple of times that I've kind of looked or just answered the phone when a recruiter called, it's like, it's not completely bleak. It's not 100% bleak in our industry, in this area. But you can't help but you hear the numbers, and like for a lot of people, and certainly people in different industries, I think this would be a really terrifying time to be without a job, because a huge number of people are without a job.
Yeah. And
the couple times I did interview and then I lost the job to someone else, I was just like, shit, that wouldn't have happened before. Like, I could have had that job, but when there are 50 people wanting that same job, the numbers are against me.
Right. Right. Well, another layer of this historical moment certainly is the whole Obama phenomenon to begin with, and the Obama administration. Can you walk me through your experience of the last election cycle, and then kind of your thoughts and feelings long about Inauguration Day, and then kind of how this first year of the administration has looked or seemed to you?
Was really exciting that he got elected. I mean, I remember thinking there's no way this country is going to elect a black man. Like, right up to the week before the election. I remember I didn't let myself believe it until it was I think it was the day before the election. And I was just like, this is really going to happen. And I remember seeing, like, there's a little playground near my company, and there were little black children playing in the playground, and I looked at them and I thought, they can now know that they could be president of the United States someday. Like, I was just so, like, moved by that, and I just wouldn't let myself believe it until something I read or heard that morning, and it was just like, it felt huge. Whereas before, I was just like, I wasn't feeling the hugeness of it, because I was just like, you know what, this isn't going to happen. And I remember that night watching the election returns, and I was watching it with Arden, and that was very moving. And Arden's half African American, and he called his dad, and that was just like. And then I heard the next day a lot of people did that. A lot of African Americans called their parent to say, "Wow!" Like, so yeah, the whole night, and just like Boston was. Just people were out in swarms. Like, Arden was bringing me home that night. He was dropping me off, or actually he was going to stay here, but he couldn't get anywhere near my apartment to park because there was just like a sea of young people out celebrating that Obama was elected.
Now let's talk about this. This is interesting because Boston, on the one hand, one of the most liberal, Massachusetts, right, one of the most liberal areas of the country. On the other hand, a northeastern city with a really, really, really troubled kind of racial history. How did you see? Did you see any tensions there, or how that played out?
See, I didn't see it in Boston, but see, I wouldn't, because I live in an area that's largely like, I'm basically on a college campus, so it's like young people from all over, more educated. Like the pockets in Boston that are would still be very racist, I would never run into them. Like, nothing in my life puts me in contact with them. And I've heard, I've had personal contact with people in other parts of the country that are still not happy and can't believe that this man became our president, kind of thing. But yeah, in Boston, I don't see it. Like, I saw a mass celebration that night, and certainly, I mean, in the industry I work in, like in the offices I've worked in, you can pretty much assume that the people you're working with are left. In the office I worked in at that company, I was still at that company on election day. Like, everyone felt completely free to talk about our political. There were only 2 people in that company of 70 who were Republican. One was my boss, unfortunately. My boss and my boss's boss were Republican. But
Is
pretty
that
much,
is that a coincidence, or is that kind of structurally how it goes?
oh, what do you mean?
Well, that the two Republicans would be at the top of the pyramid in the company.
Oh, I see. Well, she wasn't. My boss wasn't at the top of the pyramid, but yeah, no. The most of the top people were also Democrats. Yeah, so like in high tech, like a high tech entrepreneur is probably not Republican. And the guy, my boss's boss, who was a Republican, came from like a consulting background or whatever. He looked like someone who might have worked at IBM or something. It was just freakish that he was in this little startup, and yeah. So pretty much you were at liberty to just celebrate and be happy about it. So I never really ran into people. And the two Republicans knew not to talk about it. It was known that my boss's boss wanted Mitt Romney, and so he probably got some very bad reaction the first time that left his mouth, and he just never said it again. So yeah, and then inauguration. I spent inauguration day with Margaret. Oh, so everyone in my company watched all the festivities on inauguration day because we started out as like an entertainment company. Like we were doing software around the entertainment industry. So we had like a big media room and whatever. So everyone went down there. And I was like, I'm going to watch this. But I wanted to do a little bit of more work and then come back down when it all started. And then I got caught up in my work and I ended up missing it all. Like I just like worked through the whole thing. But then that night I celebrated with Margaret visiting from Ireland. And then, and certainly, so since he's taken office, there have been disappointments, but my overall feeling is that people are just harassing the hell out of him. But that's just how things have gotten to be. Like, any Democrat would have gotten some of the same treatment. I mean, I think he's, I've heard that there are a lot of threats on his life, and even just last week I heard there was a threat, like a real threat on Michelle's life in Hawaii, and they arrested the person. So, but I think the kind of like beating up over the healthcare and beating up over just anything. I mean, anything that comes out of his mouth, and that's just how politics have gotten in this country. And I think he handles things well, like trying to dampen down things, like trying to Terry told me there's this expression, no drama Obama. I've never heard this before, but he tries not to, the Republicans are all about and the crazy Fox News and the people who watch Fox are all about just being histrionic, just stirring each other up into a frenzy, and he's the opposite of that, and I think that is good. And I didn't watch all the details, but for some reason apparently this thing that happened in Detroit on Christmas Day with the Nigerian
the terrorist attack, or the attempted,
yeah. I watched the news almost not at all the last few days, but I heard that he at first was saying things went okay.
Oh, it wasn't him. It was his.
It was Janet Napolitano.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't have all the details.
Right, but still, there's. I mean, what you're saying. There's a way that. I mean, even though the man boarded a plane in Africa,
right.
Obama is being held responsible for the security questions in a way that, I mean, certainly Bush was never quite held to that standard.
Right. And that's just because his opponents weren't vicious assholes. I mean, the Republicans are just vicious. I mean, there's just nothing that they won't let come out of their mouth. Mm-hmm. They'll just say whatever it takes to tear down.
Is this something? Describe for me your own political coming to consciousness. The way you feel now, kind of how did you get there?
Oh man, that's long and complicated.
Well, that's okay.
I was raised by two very racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, sexist people. And they had come from poverty, pretty notable poverty. I'm going to show you a picture that your tape recorder can't see, but this is my dad and his siblings in the house they lived in Kentucky. Like a little tiny shack. And then by my generations, my dad and my mom lived in very severe poverty, or severe, might not be, notable poverty in Appalachia. Like a dirty mill town. And then they moved out of there. They were able to, the plant my dad worked for moved them up to Delaware. And so I grew up in a not polluted college town that his factory happened to be in. So there were like a couple of factories and then it was a college town. So I grew up, so like that whole, America's all about you can come from, parents who immigrated from another country, and even though you start in poverty, within a generation, you're all set. We were doing that. And so it's hard to realize that it's not, there were reasons that we were able to do that. Like we got lucky in a bunch of ways, and it was also kind of painful. Like it was not like fun life. Like sort of making those transitions aren't easy, but anyway, so we did, and my family was Catholic, so we definitely had that kind of very punitive way of thinking toward other people and people who weren't doing well. It was their own fault kind of thing. So I came out of that, and
you must have believed it.
Oh, sure.
To some point, like somewhere that started to change for you.
Right. Oh, yeah, I completely believed that. And my mother was very, very much admired people with money. Like, people with money were good people. Like, and people without money were bad people. And she did have a lot of bad people in her life. Like, she was surrounded by all poor people, and many, many of them were bad people, just because she was from a very messed up family. Anyway, and there was just a lot of like scraping and clawing at each other. It was a bad community to grow up in. So yeah, I grew up with all of that. But how did certainly my education at Northeastern Law School worked against that.
Right, but what got you to that point?
That I chose to go to Northeastern?
Yeah, or who was the you who went into law school?
I was already, when I was getting my education at BC and so I went in sort of having come from art history, and the history I wanted to study was about the arts and architecture. And so, I found it to be a fairly political environment. Like, at least a couple of my professors were very left, and we didn't align. And I had one classmate who was more like arts oriented and who was married to a very conservative person. And she and I were more aligned in our interests. And I felt like there was a pressure to like sort of look at things more from the left, but I didn't do it.
At that point, would you have described yourself as conservative or just apolitical?
Apolitical. Mm-hmm. Apolitical, yeah. And I think, and I probably would identify getting involved in gay rights as the thing that made me see what was bad in the system and to see how disadvantaged some people are and how corrupt the system can be. Like how people in authority aren't always right? So like the Catholic, your sort of Catholic upbringing is about don't question authority.
How did you get involved in gay rights? That was part of the law school thing?
No, it's before law school. I had a friend, when I was in college, I had a very close friend who came out to me as gay. I actually had a few friends that came out to me as gay. And then, I graduated college in 84. So by the time I graduated college, I knew probably 2 or 3 close friends who were gay. And also at that same time, the AIDS epidemic was starting. And so I started volunteering for the AIDS Action Committee. And in doing reading around that, so I started reading the gay newspapers in Boston, I started realizing, how much oppression there was, how much, intimidation and physical violence against gays there was. And so I ended up actually getting away from working with the AIDS Action Committee and more with the Fenway Community Health Center, which did help victims of violence. So I sort of more got into, just general gay rights and civil rights. And then I thought I would go to law school, because I was actually thinking about getting a master's in public health, because I'd been sort of looking at the AIDS epidemic and thinking, what can I do? Because I was in high tech, and I'm like, why am I in high tech? I fell into this, and like, I have no education around this, and like, whatever. This is never anything I would have predicted for myself. What do I really want to do? And I thought about getting a master's in public health, and then I got more looking at the civil rights aspect, and thought, no, I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to prosecute hate crimes. Not realizing that if you're a prosecutor, you have to prosecute all kinds of stuff, and it's a long time before you're doing hate crimes. And even when you start doing hate crimes, it's like you're then like going up against people who will shoot people. Like that's not like a big wimp, so I ended up not going that route. But yeah, so I think I would say that sort of learning about what life is like for that minority in this country is what did it. And then you sort of start rethinking, and like law school, I was in a pretty militant class. So the law school I went to was very left. It was like one of the 2 top law schools for public interest law in the country. And people have said we had a particularly militant class. And so we were just always like thinking and debating and getting into stuff, and like, just people's opinions were always being showered on you, and I would process them. And I remember one long conversation I had with you that I was like turning over ideas, and for like 3 days afterwards I was like thinking about stuff that we talked about, like, and that felt like a turning point.
So what was it like to carry all of that kind of unusual baggage into the .com industry, right? I mean, at that point you have a degree in the humanities, you have this whole kind of liberal arts background, you have all this law school, you have this kind of awakening political consciousness and gay rights stuff. I mean, how does all of that kind of fit into this new environment that you're moving into in the 90s?
In the 90s, the company I went back to, so I was working for a company that did security software, and they had a really good product. And security software felt important. So like I was definitely in a mindset of I should do work that's important. But law school and the idea of, like I say, like prosecuting crimes or like fighting over intense issues all the time felt very exhausting and upsetting. And I had the opportunity to go back to this company, and the company was founded by a gay man, and he was very, he was very supportive of me, and he was gay and Jewish, and he was part of why he did security software is because he wanted to prevent people's privacy from being invaded and their rights taken away from them. Like that was very much his mindset, is people need to protect their privacy because, you will end up cataloged and shipped off, or, and he was a little over the top. I won't get into that, but he was definitely, there was like a little paranoid streak. He was something beyond sensitive to the victimization of the groups he came out of, or that he was part of. But that still lined up for me. That still felt right. And within that company, this founder was eventually moved on. And within that company, there was a lot of sexism. And in high tech back then especially, was more male. And I learned of some sexist compensation practices, and I was able to work with a high-level woman, the only high-level woman in that company, to get that fixed. Like, she had been passed over, and a kind of sort of clerical level person was able to help me pull together the information, and then I was able to present it to this executive, and we were able to get this thing fixed. So it still felt like I was doing stuff that mattered, but in a less, like I wasn't being required to fight every single day. Like these were just like, that was incidental to being in this corporation, and I felt like the corporation was doing something that was worthwhile doing. But then, much of the rest of the time, like I moved on to a consulting company, and that didn't feel right. Like they weren't doing anything that felt important. And then I did eventually end up back in security software, and it was a security software company that tanked in 2002, and ever since then I've been doing stuff that doesn't feel like it matters. And that's part of, like, in this year where I've been off, I'm thinking I maybe should realign and get back to doing something that I feel like matters. Like I got a mortgage in 1997, and I feel like my thinking about what I do with my life is completely changed by that. So it's like I got this mortgage when it seemed clear. Of course I'll always be making, close to $100,000 a year and can handle this mortgage. And then in 2002 I wasn't, and now in 2009 I'm like, that's really at risk. Like maybe I should, like I've definitely for the first time been thinking like, maybe I need to go back to not just working to pay my mortgage. Maybe I need to go back to thinking about doing work that actually matters. And I probably wouldn't be thinking of that as seriously if I still had the opportunity to be making $100,000.
Right. Among the people that you know who are in your position, is this response a common one or an uncommon one?
Of being laid off from high tech, you mean?
Yeah, of being laid off and then thinking of it as, wow, this could be an opportunity to do something that I really like more than what I have been doing.
Yes. In 2002, I saw that a lot. So a lot of people who had just gotten sucked into high tech, because it was a sponge sucking up everyone, people who it didn't really make sense for, people who hadn't gone to school for it or had a passion for it, a lot of people left. I know someone who went to culinary school. I know someone who worked in a historic house as wearing costume and doing whatever. So and I think those people were happier. This time around, I think people are more frightened. I don't know if people are looking at it as much as an opportunity. And if I weren't getting disability payments, I would probably be.
Right.
I certainly would be more frightened.
Right. Well, because also this time around, it's not just that sector of the economy; it's everything.
Right.
It's like the bottom has dropped out.
Right. Yeah. Making a career change isn't that easy. Like when I've thought about that, it's like, why would someone hire me to do something I have no experience in when 100 people who've been laid off with experience? Like people talk to me about, why not use your law degree now? It's like, well, because people who graduated law school the same year I did, 1993, have been working in the law since then, and they're very experienced, and now they're laid off, and they need a law job. Like, it would be ridiculous to hire me instead of them. So I don't even try for those jobs. And it gets tiresome explaining to people why I can use my law degree, but oh well.
Well, is there anything that you feel like we should have talked about that we haven't?
Well, on the subject of Obama, I think there's a lot of just, like I said, frenzy, that's deliberate to try to, people trying to tear him down, and sort of, make him not succeed or make people think he's not succeeding. And I mainly think it's too early to get a read on whether he is succeeding or not. But one thing, if 4 years from now, or whatever, I didn't pick 4 because it's an election cycle, just whatever. If some number of years from now we look back, I don't think we will be able to assess it until some number of years from now. And if we get to that point and look back, if he hasn't succeeded in getting some fundamental change, to bring back regulation, that could have prevented this, then I will think he failed. Like if he, and I think he kind of needs to do that now. Like he needs to make sure the kind of bullshit that happened, the kind of, creating a market for mortgages, and therefore mortgages were made that never should have been made. Like if that kind of thing can still happen 6 years from now, then I will judge him harshly. But right now, I don't think you can judge him. I think we don't know, and things are in flux, and who knows what he has. Like he could be wiser than we know. So people are sort of, even people on the left are talking about being disappointed in him, and it's like, you know what, we don't know. Yeah. You got no idea right now. So
right. You're right. Or I lose patience with people who say that the health care reform is nothing. Well, no, it's not nothing. It might be disappointing. There might be all kinds of critiques to lodge against it. But this is basically something Democrats have wanted to do for 40 years and have not been able to do.
Right.
That's...
Yeah, people should, in general, people should be more like Obama's temperament. Like, don't say things so extreme as it's nothing. It's like, well, that's not a true statement. Like, be more precise, be more thought out. But so much in our culture, our media, and our movies and our TV shows, like, all are about, like, say things with the most oomph possible. Like, be as extreme. And, it's like, I don't know. So I think he's a good role model. Mm-hmm. And I hope he doesn't get, like, ripped up. And people can actually, like, do see him as a role model for all the things that he is.
Right. Not
just like, oh, okay, so he's a black man and now the little black children can know they can. No, it's like he's a role model because he's not crazy. He's like intelligent and articulate and thought out and doesn't act like, over the top.
Are you basically optimistic or basically pessimistic right now?
For myself or the country?
Well, if those are two separate things, then give me two separate answers.
I'm a little fearful for myself because, I'm getting older and, my body's maybe going to get a little bit better from this particular thing. But in general, like, it's going to be on the decline, right? Because I'm 47 years old. So I'm a little bit worried for myself, but I will try to, sort of make the best of it. Maybe I can make something actually good come of it. For the country, like, I think things could get better in a bunch of ways. And, like, you hear things about, like, because you were hearing about how bad, in what bad shape the Republican Party was. I'm like, good result. And now you're hearing a little bit about there's going to be a resurgence. I don't know. I think things could go the right way. Like, any healthcare reform is better than what we've lived with all of our lives. And I do think Obama could sort of be a role model. Like, I really do think the tenor of things could change. Like, if I were 25 years old, I think I would be feeling all around optimistic for what is to come 2 years from now. Like, this next year, I don't think it's going to be great, but I think, like, things recover. And I think we're going to recover, and I think people will learn things from it. I think, as I said, we have to institute some solid reaction to this. Some solid reforms from this have to actually happen and happen now. But I kind of think they will. And I think people will get tired of crazy. I think.
People will get tired of crazy. That is a good slogan.
You don't believe it?
A good mantra, and probably a great place to end.
Okay.
But, well, thank you.